Rishi Sunak has been to a North London Jewish school to confirm his support and the government's support, our support for the Jewish community, and that Britain will not tolerate any form of anti-Semitism, particularly in the light of the campaign by Israel's government against the Gaza Strip and the siege of Gaza. Now, the fact that people like me question the decisions of Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't like Benjamin Netanyahu. I certainly would never have voted for him had I been in Israel. It doesn't mean that I'm anti-Semitic. And the fact that equally I would like to express my concerns and solidarity with the Palestinian community does not mean that I am anti-Israeli. It simply means that I think it's important that we look after civilians, and civilians are bearing the brunt of so much of the hostilities at the moment. Both the Hamas terrorist attack was an attack against civilians. They were quite determined that they were going to be attacking Israeli civilians. In fact, they ended up killing not only Israeli civilians but also civilians from other countries, brutally. And whether there's a debate about whether 40 babies were decapitated or not, it is quite clear that babies, children, young people, women were the victims of this terrible attack. They were intentionally victims of this terrible attack. However, there are Israeli organizations that are at the forefront of the campaign against their government's activities and against this idea of retaliation, particularly campaigners like Salem, people like Sarit Mikhaeli, very courageous people. Jewish activists have been at the front of so many movements calling for social change over the last century, over the last 2 centuries. And it's wrong to lump everybody together. I think equally the government is quite right. If people want to demonstrate, if people want to march, I see no point in marching, by the way. But if people want to go out on the streets and start marching and waving flags, showing solidarity for the Palestinian community or the Jewish community in Israel, great. But not the Hamas flag. The Hamas flag shows solidarity with a terrorist organization. That cannot be allowed. Britain has already proscribed Hamas, has already defined Hamas as a terrorist organization, and it is absurd and outrageous that our national broadcaster doesn't acknowledge that. There are other countries that have not defined Hamas as a terrorist organization, so their respective national broadcasters can do really what they like. But ours should be towing the party line. They should be respecting British law. British law says that Hamas is a terrorist organization. It should be acknowledged as such. We must draw a distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian civilians. And it does strike me as extraordinary that there were 3,000 Hamas terrorists who crossed into Israel. 3,000 people who could otherwise have been gainfully employed, who could have been all that money to train them to commit atrocities, to dig tunnels. They could have been training to be doctors, lawyers, firefighters. They could have been improving the lives of the people. And yet for 16 years, Hamas has had no elections. It can't call itself a democratic government. It can only identify itself as some sort of tyranny. And are the people's lives in the Gaza Strip better off now than they were when Hamas took control? No, they're worse. And that is not a result of Israel. I think it doesn't help that people in Gaza have very little opportunity to get out of the Gaza Strip. They can, but it's very difficult. That doesn't help. But it's not Israel's fault that the people in Gaza today are worse off than they were 16 years ago. I think it will be Israel's fault should the siege progress and should a ground offensive, a brutal ground offensive, take place without a chance for the civilians genuinely to get out of the way. And even then, why should people, law-abiding civilians, clear out of their homes simply because of terrorists? Would you?